Well, hello. It is good to see you. And so I'm going to start today the way I do every single week. I want to start by welcoming our campuses. And so for those of you at our Kenosha campus, I want to say hello to you, to our Racine campus, to all of you who watch online week after week faithfully, hello. And then, of course, to our Weekends on Wednesday service. There it is. I had someone ask me this last week, is there like 1,000 people at that service? And I said, close. So here's the deal, guys. All summer long, we have been in a series called Old School. All right, and that means that every week, right before the talk, we show these old cheesy videos from back in the day and with any ridiculous laughs. But more importantly, this is a series in which all summer long, we've been looking at the lives of individuals. We've been looking at stories. We've been looking at verses and key lessons from the first part of our Bible that we call the Old Testament. And the big idea of the series that we've been in is this, that the more you know about the past, the better prepared you are for the future. And so our hope is that as we study the lives of individuals in the Old Testament, and as we look at some of the things that unfolded and how God worked in and among the Jewish people, that we would learn from them, and we would carry those lessons into our future as we move forward in our different journeys of life. Now, I'm going to start today the way that I like to start about once every couple of weeks, and that is we're going to start with a little pop quiz. All right, and so for the brave souls, you can yell out answers at our different campuses. You can yell out answers as well. If you're at home watching online, just scream, and your kids won't know what's going on, but just scream out the answers. See how smart you are. I'm going to show you pictures from different decades, and I want you to tell me what decade you think it was from. So we're going to start with this, The Godfather. Anybody, what decade? 70s. Wow, we got a very astute Weekends on Wednesday. All right, how about this? How about the mullet? When did the mullet come out? 80s. Yeah, the 80s, right? This is called the Achy, Breaky, Big Mistakey from Billy Ray Cyrus, all right? All right, how about this next one? The Barbie doll. Anybody know when it came out? 60s. It actually came out in 1959, but if you said the 60s, we'll give it to you because that's when they became very, very popular. So, how about the Green Bay Packers' first Super Bowl win? 60s. That's right, the 60s. It was 66. Their second one was in 67. Their third one was in 97. Their fourth one was in 2011. And then their fifth one will be in 2019. All right? Yeah. How about the Bears, the Super Bowl shuffle? Yeah, it was the 80s. 1986 is when they won the Super Bowl. Who was it? Which player? They call me Sweetness because I like to dance, running the balls like making romance. Walter Payton, come on, guys. All right, here we go. How about Detroit Lions, their first Super Bowl win? Never. If you're a Detroit Lions fan, it's time to throw in the towel. All right, how about this next picture? Louis Armstrong. When did he become popular? It was actually the 1920s is when his fame took off and he brought in jazz to our culture. And we'll do one more here. This clothing ad, when you look at the clothing, what era is this from? It would be from the 1960s, from 2000. Yeah, everything makes its way back, but that would be from the 1960s. So here's the deal. We live in an amazing time of history, right? Because we have watches and electronics to help us keep track of time. But for us, we literally could watch a movie and know what time period it is. We could look at a picture. We can look at hairstyles and clothing and say, I'm roughly guessing it's this era of time. It's fascinating, the period of history we live in. We are very, very aware of time. And the older we get, we're very aware of how fast time passes. That's why we have all these phrases, right? Where did all the time go? Look at how time flies. My time is valuable. For you Alan Jackson fans, right? It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Or how about this one? There's not enough time in the day. Now think about that. If there's not enough time in the day, then either A, God made a mistake by creating a 24-hour day, or B, we're the ones who are overscheduling and overcommitting ourselves. So either God made a mistake or we made a mistake. And my guess is you could probably bet your Maroon 5 concert tickets that God is not the one who's making the mistake, right? We're the ones who are overscheduling and overpromising and overcommitting. Now, 4,000 years ago, God began to build a community of people. It's a fascinating story that I wish we had time to really unpack. It'd probably take us an entire year to unpack how this thing works. But God began to build a community of people that started with just a handful of individuals, and then they grew into a large, powerful nation known as the nation of Israel. Okay, we read about this in the Old Testament. Well, for the first 400 years, or for early on in their history, for a period of 400 years, they were slaves, the Israelites were, in the nation of Egypt. And then through a series of miracles, they were freed from slavery, and now they began to experience freedom for the first time in more than 400 years. And what's interesting is even though they experienced freedom, which was great news, the bad news is for so long they had been slaves, and they had been used to people telling them when to get up and when to go to bed and what to do and how to manage their day, that they were really in many ways, not prepared for their freedom. They didn't have a lot of structure. And so God had to work with the leaders of Israel and speak clearly to them and set up structure and set up systems and set up guidelines for operating as a nation. Well, one of the systems that God built into the structure of the Jewish culture was regular days off on their calendar. So there were days on their calendar that God instituted that were just days for celebrating and days for having fun and partying. There were days for reflection. There were days for self-examination. There were days off for worship and for rest. In fact, building margin and taking time off on a regular basis was such a big deal to God that he included it in the 10 Commandments. So the same God that said, do not kill and do not steal and do not watch The Bachelor, that same God said, hey, you got to take time for rest. You got to take time to renew and refresh yourself. And that day off was referred to as the Sabbath. In fact, the way the commandment was written was this: remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Now, this is interesting because in our culture, there are many things that you and I would consider holy. There are places on this planet, there are locations, there are buildings and temples that we would consider holy. There are individuals that we might refer to as holy. There are religious items and relics that we might call as holy. But in this commandment, God said, I'll tell you what's holy. Time is holy. Now, holy means set apart. Holy means sacred. And so God says to the Jewish people, after 400 years of being enslaved in Egypt and having to work day after day after day, he says, I want you to know time is sacred, time is holy. And I want you to set aside time every single week to renew your soul, to refresh yourself. And I think you know this, the most precious gift that we have as humans is time. As valuable as we think money is, we can always make more of it. As much as we appreciate our possessions, we can always accumulate more possessions. Matter of fact, I have a buddy in San Diego about 15 years ago went bankrupt, lost everything, foreclosed on his home. Today, he lives in a home valued at over $1 million. He's doing really, really well for himself. He has totally come back. And that's because in our culture, you can always make more money and you can always accumulate more stuff. But that's not true with time. And so in the earliest days of Jewish society, God says, I'm going to set up systems and structures for you as a Jewish people. And one of the things I want you to do is learn how to rest and renew and refresh yourself. And so the commandment was instituted. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. And then it goes on, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath. It's a day of rest to the Lord your God. On it, you shall not do any work. Now, in order for us to appreciate this ancient law, this old commandment given thousands of years ago, we need to understand a little bit of the context in which it was given. Right? It was given to a group of people, the Jewish people, who had a very strong work ethic. When they were slaves in Egypt, it was them working day after day after day after day without real breaks. And so what's interesting is even after the Jewish people were free, they were so accustomed to working that the idea of taking a day off was really ridiculous. And then we got to think about the context, right? This was a time period in history where there wasn't any refrigeration. This was a time period where there wasn't any ways of really preserving food, minimal ways, but not real ways to preserve lots of food. This was a time period in history where you had to take advantage of every day to work and to create and to make things happen and to try to earn more stuff in order to get ahead. It was the only way you were going to get ahead. And so for God to say to the Jewish people, what I want you to do is find a 24-hour period of time every single week. In fact, I'm going to tell you what day that is and what period of time that is. It was Saturday. He says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you that. For God to do that is really insensitive in many ways. It's not practical. I mean, this was a group of people who were afraid of surviving. Like, how are they going to survive? They were very insecure. And so God speaks into this very insecure and this fearful group of people, to a group of people who are concerned about their schedules. And he said, take a day off every single week and build rest into your calendar. Now, there are several reasons for this. And what I want to do today is I want to look at 4 of the reasons that rest was such a big deal. Not just for the people of Israel, but for us today. Number 1 is this: rest helps us recognize God's provision. Rest helps us recognize God's provision. See, it's easy and it's pretty natural for any of us to think that the stuff we have and the stuff we've accumulated and our little bit of success, it's very easy for us to, at some level, begin to think, well, it's pretty much me. I work hard, I capitalize on my gifts and my talents, and I'm the one who seeks out opportunities, and I'm pushing myself, and I have what I have because of me. This past year, Elon Musk has been in the news a whole lot. Elon is the CEO of Tesla, as many of you know. And one of the reasons he's been on the news pretty consistently is because of his crazy work ethic. Guy works many weeks, 120-hour work weeks. Just pushes himself. He's known to be sleeping at the Tesla factory on a regular basis. He'll do it for days at a time because he knows that in order to get ahead, he has to push himself and push himself and push himself. Well, this has become problematic. There have been different newspaper articles written in the last year of people concerned about Elon. His friends and family have spoken very candidly to him and said, this is not healthy. In fact, his board of directors said, man, this is not sustainable. And Elon's response has been this: rest is not an option. And I get us thinking, because he's trying to get the company off the ground and get it profitable and make sure it's sustainable. And so he's pushing himself nonstop. Well, people who see the way he's pushing himself have responded, and it's not been well. Tesla stock has gone, literally, they've lost billions and billions and billions of dollars because they're concerned about Elon and his whole attitude of rest. And yet we could sit here and say, dude, your thinking is so off. And yet to a small extent, we all think that same way. Right? We all think, well, in order to get ahead, I just got to keep pushing myself. And it's just natural to think that way, because if you're an investor, there's always going to be more stocks and more mutual funds to read up on. If you're a realtor, there's always going to be more homes to buy and sell. If you want to be in the top of your game, if you want to be in the top of the competition, you've got to push yourself. If you're a mechanic, there's always going to be more cars to fix. If you're a guy in the trades, a woman in the trades, there's always going to be one of your friends who want to give you some sort of side hustle job, right? Help you make a little bit of money on the side so you get home after an exhausting day, and then they want you to come over and fix stuff for them. It never, ever stops. And if we're not careful, we're going to begin to think that all of our successes and all of our survival is 100% dependent on us. Well, thousands of years ago, the Jewish people were not exempt from this type of thinking. And so God says, I'm going to do something that's not going to be easy for you. I'm going to build rest and a rhythm of reflection into your calendar. So the Sabbath was God's way of saying, hey, I'm going to give you a day every single week where you can't do anything, create anything, accomplish anything. You can't succeed at anything. And during that day, I just want you to focus on the fact that in spite of all your wealth and in spite of all your success and all your accomplishments and all your money and all your abilities, that ultimately it's not really because of just you. It's because of me. You've capitalized on the gifts and the opportunities I've given you, but ultimately it's because of me. And so the Sabbath is a time set aside to reflect on the reality that it is because of God that I am who I am, I have what I have, and I am becoming who I am becoming. A day of rest is a reminder that we are not what we do. We are not defined by our work. And as Americans, this is incredibly difficult to comprehend because in our culture, what do? We take the type A driven personalities and we give them the trophies and we give them the promotions. And in our culture, if somebody calls you a workaholic, that is not a shame tactic, that is a compliment. We feel good about ourselves. And so when we take time for rest, it's very difficult, but what we're doing is we're training our heart and our minds to believe that the most important thing we do is not what we accomplish, it's who we're becoming. So pausing our lives is a reminder that even though we should work hard, and even though we should capitalize on our talents and our abilities and the opportunities that come our way, that ultimately God is the source of everything. Now, if you're thinking, well, that's great, but you don't know my life and you don't know my financial situation and you don't know how things are going for me right now in this season, it's totally impractical for me to take an entire day off every single week, then I would kind of push back a little bit and I would challenge you and I would just say this. I'm guessing that what you're really saying is it is not possible for me to maintain my current lifestyle and take a day off. Now, that may not be true in every case. I realize there's always exceptions. But in most cases, I'm guessing this is just an issue of priority. And so you may have to step back and reevaluate your lifestyle if you're going to create margin and rest in your life. One of the things I think all of us do is when we're really, really busy, which most of us are on a regular basis, we convince ourselves this is just a season. Right? The season's going to be over, but the season's really never over. And as teenagers, we thought, man, we're just overwhelmed. We got so much stuff going on, these games. I got so much stuff. I friends, and it feels like life's busy. And then you become young adults, and it feels like life's busy, and you're stretched, and you're going to college, and you're trying to make something of yourself. And then when you're single, you think, man, I'm so busy. I got all my friends want me to do everything. I'm just bald. And then you get married, and then you start having kids, and then maybe you're a single parent. I mean, there are just so many things pulling us in every direction. And you're like, finally, I can't wait till I'm an empty nester. And then you're an empty nester, and you're still busy. And then you finally get to the golden years, and it is like retirement is finally here. Thank you, Jesus. But I've talked to a whole lot of retired people, and you ask, hey, how's it going, man? You enjoying retirement? And they're like, jeez, I work nonstop. I'm busier now than when I was working at my other job. Now, to be fair, part of it is because they got to try to get everything done by 4:30 so they can hit up Golden Corral and then be in bed by 6, right? Their days are a lot shorter. And so it can always be this, well, it's just a season, but it's a season that never really ends. And so let me ask you this question. Do you have a day, a 24-hour period of time in the weekly rhythm of your life and in your schedule, on your calendar, where you say, this is a day where I am committed to not achieving anything and accomplishing anything and accumulating anything. This is a day where I just sit back, and it's not like I just binge watch Netflix all day, but I just have determined this is a day I don't work. This is a day that I remember what I have is from God. He has provided for me, and ultimately I can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can put in 120-hour work weeks. But at the end of the day, God is my provider. There's another reason that God built rhythm or rest into the rhythm of the Jewish calendar, and it's this. Rest helps us appreciate what we have. How many of us live in $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 homes that we never really get to enjoy? How many of us have worked with people for years and years and years and don't really know anything about them? How many of us are in families that are just growing apart because we're just so busy all the time? So in the book of Deuteronomy, in the Old Testament, Moses actually explains to the Jewish people why the Sabbath is such a big deal and why taking a day off is a big deal. Here's what he says to the Jewish people. He says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt and that the Lord your God had brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. I love this because it feels like two very different issues. Remember, you were slaves in Egypt. God set you free, so take a day off. It's like, that doesn't feel like it's connected. But what Moses is saying is, listen, there was a time period in our history where you could not take a day off. And yet God set us free. And what I don't want you to forget, Jewish people, what I do not want you to forget, nation of Israel, is that it is God who has provided for us and has been faithful to us over the years. And so a day off is a time to remember the goodness of God and to really appreciate what we've been blessed with. I think this is one of the great things of having birthdays and anniversaries on the annual calendar, right? Because you have your children, you just kind of get accustomed to them, and you just rugrats run around the house, and you shut the door and clean up your room and do your homework, and it gets frustrating. But then there's this day every single year where you just get to stop and say, it's your birthday, hey, we celebrate you, woohoo, happy birthday, we're so glad you came, right? It's just, there's this excitement, and we celebrate them, and so we reserve that. Or anniversaries, right? We just become accustomed to our spouse, our partner, and it's easy to not remember to appreciate them, but those dates come. In fact, in our family, back in, it'd been 2006, we adopted our son Jaden. And not only do we celebrate this kid's birthday every single year, we celebrate his adoption day. And we celebrate it by telling him we're going to stop making payments on him. No, we do not say that to him. But we celebrate his adoption day because Randy and I don't want to forget this was a blessing from the Lord. Some of you, I'll tell a story sometime, but he was abandoned underneath a car in a duffel bag. And it was just a crazy story of how we got connected with him. And man, he's just but man, it's easy to forget that story and just try and move on and get busy with life. And so it's built into the regular rhythm of our calendar to enjoy and appreciate. And I know resting and taking breaks it's full-on rebellion to our culture. Because the American culture is all about there's more to get done. And when you take time to rest, you're basically saying, I'm not going to get it all done. And what's interesting is if we were to take time to look at the life of Jesus, which we're not doing in this series because we're really in the Old Testament, but man, Jesus took breaks all the time. He got away from people. He didn't meet every demand. He didn't respond to every request. And it wasn't because he didn't love people. It was because he knew that he needed to refresh and renew himself in order to bring his best to people. So there's a third reason that rest was incredibly important for the Jewish people, but also for us, and that is rest sustains us for the long haul. It sustains us for the long haul. One of my favorite leadership quotes is that the best thing you can bring to your team is energy. And the reason it's my favorite leadership quote is because it's true, right? The best thing you can bring to your employer or employees, the best thing you can bring to your coworkers is energy. The best thing you can bring to your family is your energy, your attention. The best thing you can bring to your spouse, your energy. The best thing you can bring to your friends is energy. And so we've got to do whatever we can to protect our energy, which means doing our best to limit or stay away from the things that drain us. And then doing whatever we can to pursue the things that fill us. Okay? So imagine if life was like a bucket. You've got to ask yourself, what is it that fills my bucket and what is it that drains my bucket? One of the things that drain most humans, even though we don't think of it, is technology. It does. We don't even think about it, but it drains us. And the reason we don't think about it is because we all love technology. And there's nothing wrong with technology. But if we don't learn to manage technology, it will manage us. And it's understandable. Because there's so much in this piece of technology, in this phone, that we could literally spend our entire life looking at it, which some of us do, right? On average, Americans look at their phone 150 times a day. Check out this ad from Radio Shack, 1991. There's like what, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 different products on here. Every one of those products today are found on your phone. An ad from 1991. We love technology. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it can't manage our life. In fact, this idea of how much we love technology, some of you might remember this. I think it's evidenced in a very clear way at the end of the classic movie Napoleon Dynamite, where Kip is telling LaFonda how much he loves her, and he's singing this song to her at their wedding. And if you're like, I've never seen that movie, let me at least show you this scene. Check it out.
We met chat room. Now our love can fully bloom. Sure, the World Wide Web is great, but you make me salivate. Yes, I love technology, but not as much as you see. But I still love technology, always and forever.
But I still love technology, always and forever. And I know that's how most of us feel like, man, I love technology. And here's the thing, as great as it is, if we don't learn to put it down sometimes and shut it off and get away from our email, our minds never have a chance to rest. And so it's hard to bring out our best energy to the people in our life or to the things that we're doing if we're continually being interrupted with bings and beeps. Another thing that drains us as individuals is toxic people, pests in our life, right? The people in our life where every time we're around them, it's like negative, 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 or it's gossip, or it is drama, right? You got the people you get around, it's like everything's drama. Oh, check out what happened to me today. And my son earlier today said, Dad, I almost died. I was on a roller coaster and it got stuck for 20 minutes. I said, you did not almost die. All right, do not tell people you almost died because you did not almost die. But you get around people and they're just dramatic all the time, or they're cynical or judgmental. Man, if you've got someone in your life who's constantly toxic, I am begging you, limit your time around them because we become like the people we hang out with. Another thing that can be incredibly draining is our schedules, right? When our day planners and our different agendas start to fill up and we've just got so much going on that we can't get any breaks. Now here's the deal. Nobody is going to argue that we need to take care of our bodies, right? We're all going to look at Elon Musk and say, dude, take care of yourself. But I would push it a step further and say, more than our physical bodies needing rest, our souls need rest. Our souls need to be disconnected from the binging and the beeping and the toxic people and the overly scheduled calendars long enough to find peace and solitude in connection with God. When is the last time you truly connected with God? When is the last time that you felt your heart was fully synced with His heart? So we need to protect ourselves from the things that drain us. Now, on the other hand, we need to fill ourselves with things that fill us up, right? So one of the things that I would say fill me up, life-giving people. And I was smart. I grabbed a picture of my wife, right? But my friends, they fill me up. My family fills me. I love doing breakfast with my kids. I love going on kayak trips with them or little vacations. I love spending time with my wife and going on dates, right? I love the reflection it's putting in some of your eyes right now, right? I love all that. We need to find life-giving people that build us up, that can bring energy to us. Another thing that fills us up is satisfying work. Right now, you might not like working in the trades, but some of the most satisfied people on this planet are people when they get up are energized to be at their job. And for the most part, that's me. I get up in the morning and I have energy about my job. There are certainly things that drain me, right? Having to keep track of a bunch of details and having to manage different systems and stuff. I hate that stuff, right? I don't like big, long meetings, none of that stuff. All of you drain me on a regular basis, so I would add that. No, for the most part, I love everything I do. And in every job, you're going to have something that drains you. But man, finding satisfying work. And if you're in a job where you're like, man, day after day after day, I get up and it just drains me and it's killing me, I would say get on your knees and begin to pray that either God changes your attitude or helps you get and become a part of a different department or opens up a door for you to find satisfying work. Because the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes actually says that work ought to be satisfying. And I'm cognizant, like it's not as easy as just leave my job and go find another job. I get that. Right, there's a lot of complexities involved, but I'm telling you, if you're at a job that's constantly draining you, that's not good for your soul. Another thing that I would say would be helpful for all of us to renew and fill ourselves with is recreation. And maybe that's getting up early and just having a cup of coffee and some solitude. Maybe for you that's walking. For some of you, it's reading. For a very, very small portion of you, that's exercise, right? That fills you up. That's energizing to you. Whatever it is, I would say find what you can to fill your bucket. Rest sustains us for the long haul. And then a final thing that rest does is this. Rest helps me connect with God. It is almost impossible to connect with God when my life is on fast forward all the time. It is almost impossible to connect with God when all I do is have this growing to-do list that I feel like I can't let go of. Every single one of us need a rhythm in our calendar to connect with God. I think weekly services are a huge part of that. I love what the author of Psalm, I believe 46 says, when he writes this, "Be still and know that I am God." When is the last time you were just still to think about God? See, if I'm going to connect with God, it's got to be more than just, shooting up these bottle rocket prayers while I'm driving. God, just help me. Oh, God bless me. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be more than just praying while we're in the shower. If I'm going to connect with God at a deep level, I've got to set aside time. And we all connect with God differently, right? Some do it through the reading of Scripture. And I think that's important for all of us, but for some, that's a different way of connecting. For some, you really connect with God through prayer. Others through music, and so listening to worship music and setting aside time for that. Some of us connect with God by being outdoors. All of us at some level connect with God in community, which is why all throughout the ancient scriptures, community is such a big deal. So gathering in large settings like this, but in a couple of weeks, when we launch our group season, you'll have an opportunity to get together with a smaller group of people. The bottom line is this: if you are feeling disconnected from God, if it's hard for you to engage in musical worship, if it's hard for you to listen to a talk and feel like, man, I'm connecting with God at any level, my guess is your life's out of control. It's chaotic. And here's what I know about life. As much as we want to have easier schedules and more margin, as much as we all believe that we should have a little bit of time to rest and renew and reflect and relax, it is never going to happen if we do not plan it. And so I'll just wrap up by saying this. Rest needs to be planned. And several years ago, I came across, it wasn't original to me, came across a plan that I have always remembered. And so I want to introduce it to you if you've never heard me go through this before. Number one, you want rest, you have to learn to divert daily. Every single day, you need some sort of hobby or activity that just distracts you from work. Every single day, you need a time where you just say, okay, no more checking email, no more text messages. And I'm not talking like at 10:59 p.m., right when you're going to sleep, right? But a time where you're just like, no more. I'm not going to binge watch anything right now. I'm just going to free my mind. Divert daily. Number two, withdraw weekly. We all need time in our calendar and our schedule where we just withdraw. And as difficult as it is, this would be for any of us, my challenge to you is consider having a technology Sabbath where for one day every week, I know, but for one day every week, you just say, I'm not going to get into technology today. I'm going to try to enjoy the other areas of life. And then number three, abandon annually. If it's possible with your work to get away for a week or for 2 weeks, do it. Every single year, find space in your life to renew and refresh and relax. It helps us to remember God and His blessings. It helps us to appreciate what we have. It helps us to fill our bucket, right? It helps us to go the long haul. We need this in our life. So the next step, the action step for today is just simply this. Would you consider either finding something to eliminate from your life, the things that drain you, or maybe not completely eliminate it. There's some people you can't eliminate from your life because you're married to them, or or you just see them every single day, and maybe you just say, I have to limit my time around that coworker. But either find a way to eliminate something from the bucket or find something to fill your bucket. So God says to this nation of Israel that He's forming, He says, I want you to take a day off. And even though this was a law for people thousands of years ago, and we could say, well, we're not bound to those laws, which is true, we can learn from them. In fact, in the New Testament, in the second part of the Bible, we read this: for everything that was written in the past, referring to the Old Testament, was written to teach us, so that through the endurance taught in the scriptures and the encouragement they provide, we might have hope. Get rest. Find ways to renew and refresh. Now, next week is the final week of this series. All right, we're wrapping it up. It's the final happy hour, which is the time you can come before service and eat hot dogs and chips and just hang out. Right, that's our final one. And then 2 weeks from now, we're launching a brand new series called Everybody Always: Becoming Love in a World of Setbacks and Difficult People. I'm super excited for a new series to be launching, and be thinking now of who you can invite to come with you. I'm going to pray, and then we'll wrap up our service. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would give us the wisdom to identify the areas of our life that are just so busy and so overcomplicated and overstretched, that you would give us the wisdom to identify those areas so we can begin to cut back. Give us wisdom to identify the things that drain us and the things that fill us, so that we can live as energized individuals, bringing our best to you, bringing our best to our friends and our family and our co-workers. Give us wisdom to know what to do and courage to do it. In Jesus' name, amen.